30 Days of Transformation, A Journey of Consistency. Blank. Underscore. Blank. Chapter 1. The First Step. David was a man of routine. A typical middle-aged office worker whose life was a series of unremarkable days. At 32, he had found himself stuck in a comfortable but stagnant existence. His job at the marketing agency was decent, offering him financial stability, but the excitement and sense of purpose he once felt in his career had long faded. Outside of work, his life was no different. He had tried various diets, workout routines, and self-help programs, but none of them lasted more than a few weeks. He was tired of making empty promises to himself, only to see them fall apart. One evening, as David scrolled through social media, he came across a motivational video titled, "How Consistency Can Transform Your Life in 30 Days." The speaker, a well-known personal development coach, spoke about a simple but powerful concept: showing up every day. No matter what, if you commit to something for 30 days straight, you'll see results that go beyond what you expect. The speaker said, "It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up and doing the work every single day." The words struck David deeply. He had never truly stuck to anything for 30 days straight. Not consistently. It felt like a challenge, but one that he was ready to accept. He decided that for the next 30 days, he would commit to making small, consistent changes to his life. The goal wasn't to overhaul everything at once, but to prove to himself that he could stick to something for an entire month. That night, David wrote in his journal, "Tomorrow is the first day of my 30-day journey. I'll start small, no excuses. Blank. Underscore. Blank." Chapter 2. The Struggles of Day 1. The first morning was harder than David anticipated. He woke up early, intending to begin with a short workout before work, but the comfort of his bed made it hard to get up. It was cold outside, and the last thing he wanted to do was sweat. Yet, he pushed through the resistance and forced himself out of bed. David spent 15 minutes stretching and doing light cardio in his living room. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As he finished, he felt a small sense of accomplishment. That was the first day. The next few days were a mix of small victories and struggles. On day 2, he slept through his alarm and missed his workout. At first, David thought about giving up. After all, he had already failed once. But remembering the words of the speaker, he told himself, "One mistake doesn't ruin everything. I'll get back on track tomorrow." And that's what he did. He set the alarm earlier, got up, and completed his workout the next day. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Blank. Underscore. Blank. Chapter 3. The Reality of Consistency. By day 7, David was starting to notice subtle changes. His body felt a little stronger, and his energy levels were higher than usual. He didn't feel like a completely new person, but there was a noticeable difference. His mornings were more productive, and he was starting to enjoy the small victories that came with showing up every day. However, the mental battle wasn't over. On day 9, David felt the familiar pull of procrastination. It had been a long day at work, and all he wanted to do was relax in front of the TV. But he remembered the commitment he had made. It wasn't about perfection, it was about showing up. With a deep sigh, David stood up, pulled out his yoga mat, and spent 20 minutes stretching and breathing deeply. It wasn't the high-energy workout he had planned, but it was something, and that something kept the momentum going. Momentum, David realized, was key. It was the force that propelled him to continue. Even when he didn't feel like it. He didn't always have the energy for a full workout, but he kept showing up. Every day that he stuck with it, the habit became easier. Not perfect, but easier. Blank. Underscore. Blank. Chapter 4. Doubts and Lessons Learned. As the days passed, David began to experience moments of doubt. By day 15, he started questioning the impact of his efforts. Quote, "Am I really making progress?" he thought. He wasn't seeing drastic physical changes, and his career still felt uninspiring. It felt like the results weren't coming quickly enough, and the instant gratification he craved was nowhere to be found. David faced a crucial choice: to keep going or to quit. On the night of day 15, David had an honest conversation with himself. He was tempted to give up, but something inside him pushed him to continue. He thought about the initial purpose of his 30-day challenge. He hadn't started this to see instant results. He had started to prove to himself that he could stay consistent. David's goal wasn't to get perfect results, but to prove that consistency, even in the small things, mattered. With that realization, he decided to press on. He knew that the changes he was looking for wouldn't be immediate. But the important part was continuing the journey, no matter what. Blank. Chapter 5. New Challenges and Growth. By the time David reached day 20, he had developed a routine. His workouts became longer and more focused, and he began to feel proud of his progress. He wasn't looking for perfection anymore. He was simply looking for the next step, the next small improvement. But a new challenge presented itself: work. As David's consistency in his personal life began to strengthen, he noticed the same lack of drive creeping into his job. He was still committed to his 30-day challenge, but now he realized that consistency wasn't just for exercise. It applied to every area of his life. So, he decided to focus on his work habits as well. He committed to making one small improvement at work each day. Whether it was a small task that had been on his to-do list for weeks or taking a moment to connect with his colleagues. David applied the same principle of consistency to his professional life. Soon, the results became apparent. He found himself more focused during meetings, more proactive in handling tasks, and more engaged with his colleagues. He wasn't just showing up physically at work, he was showing up mentally and emotionally as well. Chapter 6. A Changed Man. By day 30, David felt like a different person. The results weren't just visible in his body, though he had lost a few pounds and felt more energized. The true transformation had taken place in his mindset. He had developed a sense of discipline that he had never known before. He had learned to trust himself, to rely on his ability to show up each day. When David looked at his journal on the night of day 30, he felt proud. The page was filled with check marks, each one representing a day he had shown up. And as he flipped through the pages, he realized that the most important result wasn't just the physical changes or the professional improvements. It was the confidence he had built by proving to himself that he could stick with something, no matter the obstacles. David knew that this 30-day challenge was only the beginning. The habits he had built were now a part of who he was. And as he looked toward the future, he felt ready to take on even bigger challenges, knowing that consistency would always be his secret weapon. Chapter 7. The Importance of Small Wins. On day 32, David woke up with an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. He had just finished the 30-day challenge, but the journey was far from over. He realized that success wasn't a single destination but a continuous process of small, meaningful wins that added up over time. During the first few days of his challenge, David had focused entirely on fitness. He followed a daily routine that included stretching, cardio, and strength exercises. These actions felt monumental at first, but as the days went by, they began to feel like second nature. David didn't have to think about getting out of bed to exercise anymore. It had become a reflex. But the real transformation occurred when David started viewing life through the lens of consistency. Every aspect of his life became an opportunity to practice this principle. He realized that small improvements compounded over time, and it wasn't always about taking big, grandiose steps. In fact, the small wins were the ones that made the biggest difference. Chapter 8. Turning Challenges into Opportunities. One evening, David faced a challenge that he hadn't expected, a difficult project at work. For the past few weeks, he had felt somewhat disconnected from his work, distracted by his personal improvements and habits. But that day, his manager assigned him a project that seemed overwhelming. The deadline was tight, and the expectations were high. It was exactly the kind of challenge David used to avoid. In the past, David would have panicked. He would have procrastinated, stressed out, and made excuses. But now, with the consistency habit ingrained in him, he faced the challenge head-on. Instead of running from it, he decided to break the project down into smaller, manageable tasks. Every task, no matter how small, was a win. David committed to showing up for the work, just like he had committed to showing up for his daily fitness routine. Each time he checked off a task from his to-do list, he celebrated a small victory. By the end of the week, the project was completed on time. And not only did David feel a sense of accomplishment, But he also realized that his approach of consistency worked in every area of his life. It wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up and doing the work. Step by step, day by day. Blank. Underscore. Blank. Chapter 9. The Ripple Effect. As David's consistency began to take root in his personal and professional life, he noticed a surprising ripple effect. His interactions with others had changed as well. He had always been the type to avoid conflict, to keep things superficial. But now, David felt more confident in his ability to communicate openly and honestly. One day, a colleague, Sarah, came to him with a problem. Sarah had been dealing with a personal issue that was affecting her work performance, and she was struggling to meet her deadlines. In the past, David might have given her a half-hearted suggestion or just nodded sympathetically. But now, he found himself offering practical advice. He shared his journey, explaining how consistency had helped him manage his own stress and workloads. "It's all about breaking things down into smaller tasks," David said. "If you tackle one thing at a time, it feels less overwhelming, and just keep showing up for yourself, even on the days when you don't feel like it." To his surprise, Sarah took his advice to heart. She thanked him and promised to give it a try. Over the next few weeks, David noticed that Sarah had become more focused and engaged at work. She had implemented a similar routine, focusing on consistent, small steps rather than overwhelming herself with everything at once. The ripple effect was becoming clear. His commitment to consistency was not just transforming his own life, but it was also helping those around him. Blank. Underscore. Blank. Chapter 10. Overcoming Plateaus. Despite all the progress David had made, he found himself hitting a plateau on day 45. The excitement of the initial 30-day challenge had worn off, and the results he was seeing were slower than he expected. His body wasn't changing as drastically as before, and work didn't feel as rewarding. He began to doubt himself again. Was he doing enough? Were his efforts really paying off? It was tempting to fall back into old habits and quit. But David knew better than to give in to these feelings. He had come too far to stop now. Instead, he took a step back and reminded himself of the importance of the process. He realized that progress wasn't always linear. There would be days when it felt like he wasn't moving forward. But that didn't mean he wasn't. The consistency he had built was still there, even if the immediate results weren't as visible. David began to reflect on his journey, taking stock of how far he had come. He remembered the early days when even getting out of bed for a workout had felt like a struggle. Now, he had not only developed a daily routine, but he had also learned to enjoy the process. Instead of focusing on the slow progress, he focused on the fact that he had not given up. The true power of consistency was in its ability to carry you through the difficult moments and the plateaus. It was about persistence, not perfection. Blank. Underscore. Blank. Chapter 11. Embracing the New Normal. By the time David reached day 60, he had completely embraced the concept of consistency. It was no longer a challenge or a goal to strive for. It had become part of who he was. His routine had evolved, but the principle remained the same. Show up every day, do the work, and trust the process. His body had transformed, no longer the tired, sluggish version of himself he had once known. He felt more energized, focused, and productive. Work had become more fulfilling as well. David had started taking on new projects with a renewed sense of purpose, tackling each challenge with the same consistency that had guided him through his personal growth. His relationships had improved, too. He had become a better listener, a more present friend, and a more supportive colleague. The small wins, both in his work and personal life, had added up to something far greater than he had ever imagined. Consistency had not only changed his habits but had transformed the way he saw himself and the world around him. Blank. Underscore. Blank. Chapter 12. A New Beginning. David's journey of consistency didn't end with the 30 days or even the 60-day mark. It was an ongoing process, a lifelong commitment. He had learned that real transformation wasn't about reaching a destination but about continually improving, one small step at a time. Looking back, David could see how far he had come. But more importantly, he had learned how to embrace the journey itself. He knew that life would continue to present challenges, but he was no longer afraid of them. He had built the resilience to face anything that came his way. armed with the knowledge that consistency, no matter how small, could overcome any obstacle. As David stood in front of the mirror one morning, reflecting on his transformation, he smiled. The man staring back at him wasn't the same person who had started the 30-day challenge. He was stronger, more confident, and more at peace with himself. But most importantly, he was consistent, and that was enough. Conclusion. The power of consistency. David had proven to himself that consistency was the key to any transformation. It wasn't about being perfect every day, it was about showing up every day. No matter the circumstances. He had learned that success wasn't a grand event but a series of small steps taken consistently over time. As he moved forward, David knew that life would always have its ups and downs. But now, he had the tools to face those challenges with confidence. With consistency as his foundation, he was ready for whatever came next. And with that, David's journey was only just beginning.